5 times the movies got the characters wrong. Hello to all you witches and wizards out there. In today's video, we are going to be looking at 5 characters that the movies didn't quite get right. Now, don't get me wrong, the majority of the characters are superbly cast. Snape, Umbridge, Hagrid, and even the Dursleys are as close to being exactly what we had in our heads as was possible. Even Mrs. Fig, who barely has 2 scenes in the whole film series, is just spot on. That being said, there were a few characters that didn't fit well and left a sour taste in our subconscious. So much so that we were compelled to dive into our pensives to bring you this list. It might have been acting choices gone wrong, unfortunate or risky decisions by the director, a communication error between the book and the script, or a combination of all of these. Who can say for sure? All we know is it just isn't right. Number 5. Fleur isn't a veela. So this might not make the most sense to put on this list, since it's not really anything they did wrong so much as something they didn't include. You might say that this is just a small detail and not something to worry about. Of course, they couldn't include every detail about every character into the movie. Is it important that Fleur is a veela? Well, yes. Being part veela is an integral part of her character. Her wand core is even a veela hair, her grandmother's to be exact. She undoubtedly has some of the old veela charm. To quote the book, a great collective sigh issued from the assembled witches and wizards as Monsieur Delacour and Fleur came walking up the aisle. Fleur gliding, Monsieur Delacour bouncing and beaming. Fleur was wearing a very simple white dress and seemed to be emitting a strong silvery glow. While her radiance usually dimmed everyone else by comparison, today it beautified everybody it fell upon. Ginny and Gabrielle, both wearing golden dresses, looked even prettier than usual, and once Fleur had reached him, Bill did not look as though he had ever met Fenrir Greyback. Her effect on Ron and others is supposed to be supernatural and somewhat completely involuntary. Without that, Ron isn't really under a spell. He's just, well, an irregular teenage boy looking more stupid than he rightly should. And asking her out and getting all shaky without Fleur being a veela isn't quite in character for Ron. For book Ron anyway, but we will get to Ron later. Number 4. Dumbledore calmly talking to Harry.
Harry, did you put your name in a goblet of fire?
No, sir.
You asked one of the oldest students to do it for you?
No, sir.
You're absolutely sure?
Yes, sir.
I'm sure this change is one that doesn't need any introduction. It's actually one of the most infamous scenes in all of Harry Potter that even some non-fans are aware of. It's one that when we watched it in the cinema, it made us confused, frustrated, and possibly even laughed at the delivery of the line. It was an important and pivotal scene in the book, and as such, we fans knew how it was supposed to be said. Leaving the cinema, it was clear that this was the standout piece from the movie that we all agreed wasn't right. Not to say that the actors performed poorly, not at all. The emotions they brought to the scene fit the scene, just a different one. It's supposed to be tense, quiet, solemn, apprehensive, not shocking, alarming, and honestly downright aggressive. Dumbledore isn't aggressive. He's powerful, but always calm and collected. That's his whole personality. For him to be so charged over a question he probably already knows the answer to is just absurd. Number 3. Movie Ron being a comic relief. Ron. A plucky, dim-witted buffoon of a friend. He's not really that smart or that useful, right? Beyond playing chess, I suppose. Well, if you read the books, you would have been really outraged at the lengths the movies went to throw him under the bus. I mean, yes, I understand the need for a comic relief, but there's already Mr. Filch and Crabbe and Goyle who were written as comic reliefs. Did you really need to do that to Ron? That being said, it happened slowly, sneakily. The odd line taken here, the odd scene adapted there, but what it boiled down to was a different Ron than we know in the books. Not convinced? Let's have a look at a few scenes in particular.
This is Devil's Snare. You have to relax. If you don't, it'll only kill you faster.
Kill us faster? Oh, now I can relax.
In this scene, Ron is supposed to be very helpful in figuring out the devil's snare, while Hermione, under stress of course, forgets that she can do magic. Ron is the one to remind her. I mean, she's only been a witch for a year at best, and she still thinks like a muggle. Especially in these kinds of situations, it's even a recurring theme. Hermione gets the credit, and Ron isn't just passed over, he's actively dumbed down. In another scene, we have an explanation of the term mudblood.
Malfoy. He called Hermione, well, I don't know exactly.
Call me a mudblood.
He did not.
In the books, this comes from Ron. He often acts as the guide to the magical culture to Harry, and by extension the audience, when Harry discovers things that muggles wouldn't know. Mudblood is one of these things, and honestly, Hermione, who likely would have read about it, just isn't the right person to be explaining this, as she really doesn't have that much first-hand knowledge about the word. You know who does? Ron! You know what Ron's busy doing in this scene? Vomiting slugs. In the shrieking shack, Hermione bravely comes to Harry's aid and stands in front of him, saying that to get to Harry, they will have to go through her first.
If you want to kill Harry, you'll have to kill us too.
Not out of character for Hermione at all. At least, movie Hermione, who gets to steal a lot of Ron's thunder. This is Ron's line, and he does it to protect Harry and Hermione. They didn't just make Ron dumber and potentially more cowardly, they also made him care less about Hermione. In Snape's class, when Hermione is answering his questions about werewolves, Hermione gets shut down and shut down hard by Professor Snape.
No one. How disappointing.
Please, sir. An animagus is a wizard who elects to turn into an animal. A werewolf has no choice. With each full moon, when he transforms, he no longer remembers who he is. He'd kill his best friend if he crossed his path. Furthermore, the werewolf only responds to the call of its own kind.
Oh!
Thank you, Mr. Malfoy. That is the second time you have spoken out of turn, Miss Granger. Are you incapable of restraining yourself, or do you take pride in being an insufferable know-it-all?
Book Ron actually stands up for her in a very Ronish way. Of course, this great scene that showcases Ron's core values is stripped away from him, and he doesn't get to stand up to Snape and defend Hermione. On the contrary, he's actually just mean to Hermione instead.
You and your friends take from my boat! Don't take anything. I didn't take anything. I don't believe it.
Okay, so this is one that also plays into that same story where Ron just doesn't care as strongly about Hermione in the movies. Yes, he still falls for her, but it seems like it's downplayed, almost hidden at times. In the books, Ron goes mad with anger and is pounding on the walls when he's forced to listen to Hermione being tortured. In the movies, well, it's a little more subdued, shall we say. He's almost trying to put on a brave face, which just isn't Ron in this scene. Book Ginny and movie Ginny. What can we say about Ginevra Weasley? Well, a lot, actually. The movies completely stripped her of all her awesomeness. Movie Ginny is washed out and bland. She's awkward and shy for far too long and doesn't really come into her own as a strong character at all, unlike in the books. Book Ginny is fierce and fun and eventually quite popular on her own, and not just as another Weasley or a friend of Harry's. Ginny was cool. She helped found the DA. She was a talented witch who was great at spells, confident, and actually pretty funny. As for the romance between Harry and Ginny, well, that's a little harder to criticize. The time frame, situations, and chemistry are all different to how it is described in the book, so we can't really say it's done badly, it's just different. But the majority of fans agree that this is just awkward and cringy and difficult to watch. And if that is the collective feeling of most fans, then it's pretty clear that it was misrepresented. There's the kiss, possibly one of the most awkward ones in cinema history. The poorly received cookie.
Don't you trust me?
Just,
And finally, the shoelace moment.
Has Ron gone to bed?
not yet. No.
Shoelace.
Flitwick. No character has changed as dramatically as Professor Flitwick between movies 2 and 3. The books describe Phileas Flitwick as a tiny little professor that had to stand on a stack of books to see over his desk. He wears old robes and is aged a little beyond his years. But in the later movies, it is not only his choice of wardrobe that is different, he is suddenly a much younger man sporting a full head of brown hair and a mustache. This was a change that went completely unexplained by the movie producers. Eventually, it was the actor himself who shed some light on the transformation on his Twitter account. Warwick Davis explained that in The Prisoner of Azkaban, we do not see Professor Flitwick at all, but a different character altogether. Davis was cast to play a choir master in the 3rd movie. The director of the 4th movie, Mike Newell, then preferred Davis's new look and decided to keep it for Professor Flitwick.